What's up, everybody? Welcome to another edition of the Surf and Sales Podcast, Season 3, Episode 12. We're here in March 7th, 2022. How you doing, Richard?
I'm good, man. We are less than 60 days, right? May 10th, we go to Costa Rica for Surf and Sales, right? Need to buy a plane ticket. So
I actually got my plane ticket already, if you can believe that.
I do, because you're much more of a surfing degenerate than I am.
Yeah, but I'm usually not, doing these things earlier ahead of time. So yeah. I'm a little proud of myself. We've got a little bit different kind of a show today, but we're still brought to you each and every episode by our good friends Sendoso, Scratchpad, and Outreach. And Outreach has got a special link for everybody. Give them the link, Richard.
Yeah, it is click.outreach.io/surf. That's right, click.outreach.io/surf. I've got an awesome landing page set up for you, and feel free to say you heard about them on here, and that we said you demand a 10% rate reduction for purchasing. So you can battle it out with them, but tell them we said so.
Yeah, battle it out, but you'll win the battle. You'll win the battle.
Yes.
So Richard mentioned Surf and Sales. We have 3 events coming up in 2022. The first of which is in May. And there's actually now, it was sold out, but now we have a spot or two available. We've had a couple people who've had to kind of not attend for a few reasons. So we expect it to sell out once we let everybody know. But one of the things we do at Surf and Sales is we hold these kind of coaching sessions in this place that we call the Crow's Nest. You go up the staircase at one of the houses, it's an outdoor balcony. We kind of hang up there after dinner. And some of the guests come one by one, and we spend 45 minutes to an hour just chatting it up and answering questions that they have. So we decided to see who would be interested in doing a virtual Crow's Nest session rather than a traditional podcast. And we are here with our guest, Eric Steeves. Eric is the fractional CRO at 21 Knots, and he's the co-founder of PKA Solves. Eric, welcome to the show, man.
Thanks for having me. Great to be here, guys.
Yeah, we appreciate you being open to this different style of show today, and do our best. Hopefully give you some advice, answer some questions that you might have. I'm sure Richard and I will have a few questions for you as well. So let's get into it, man. Tell everybody a little bit about what you're doing right now, what you're selling, what the cycle is like, all that kind of stuff, so people have some context.
So at the moment, I sell at the agency level in more than one place. So I don't sell SaaS in the way that a lot of other people do. I'm selling Salesforce consulting. I'm selling GTM consulting. And so I kind of sell at the intersection of SaaS and agency, which is actually where I started listening to a lot of your content when you were talking about, can you scale your agency result? And I was like, well, hey, that guy's talking to me.
So are you working for yourself right now, or do you have staff or partners? Who's involved in the company?
So my partner at 21 Knots is Jean Say, and he's my Salesforce mentor. And 21 Knots is his agency that he does Salesforce consulting out of. And then he had been mentoring me in how to be a Salesforce consultant. And we started having a really cool knowledge handoff between my sales background and his technical background, where we were able to say, we've got the peanut butter and jelly that we should work together. And I started reading about CRO and the demand for it. And I said, that's actually what I do in every company one way or another. So that's it. That's what I do. And in Project Kickass, that was actually founded with my partner, Rebecca. She's my life partner. And we are the only people in our agency. And we do also Salesforce consulting. We do virtual events and getting people broadcast ready, which typically winds up being like getting them like I am here with the backgrounds and stuff. And then another thing we started doing, because people just keep asking for it, is building their communities. So like community building as a service, as an agency level.
That's pretty interesting, the community building as a service portion. I want to ask one question before we let you start peppering us with questions. So give some people some advice who are sales leaders or founders who are in the very early days of building out their sales org. What are 2 or 3 things that people get wrong about setting up their Salesforce instance that you could tell them, please, for the love of all things good and holy, don't do this. Here's a better way to do it. Give some people some advice, and then we'll get into your questions.
Don't make a field or an object for every shiny object. Hold yourself to a spreadsheet. A lot of Salesforce consultants will be like, you only have a Google Doc, you only have an Excel sheet, but like, honestly, you should be able to articulate your data model and workflow in an Excel sheet and explain what everyone's getting out of each piece of data and what you're going to use it for. And then, for the love of God, hold it all to your customer. Like, what problem does this help me solve for my customer, even in your CRM? Because honestly, if it's doing both, you're going to get more out of it anyway. So like recently we were building one that had BANT as the ground level framework, and BANT is like a starting point, but like it's not the be all end all. It's just there as a crutch to make an easier build in the instance, right? So I was like, well, what about Spiced? Because like Spiced is way more customer friendly and way more in line with how I work with people. So I guess my main takeaway to yours would be map it all out in an Excel sheet. Like Tim Savage from Typing DNA like gave a really cool talk about how like he used to only have an Excel sheet, and that now that he has Salesforce, he's able to get so much more out of it for himself and his team because he's able to take it back to that 2D fundamental.
All right. First of all, I threw up a little bit in my mouth.
Yeah, there was a couple of sound effects in there, Richard. You want to comment on the sound effects?
Sure. That was the whole BANT thing.
Which is not Eric's, not Eric. Eric's not endorsing that, by the way. He was just talking about the work he was doing.
But there are two things that are very interesting aside, that I'll comment on. One is, one, I should probably talk to Eric about community building, and two, now, Scott, I think you're ready to move into Salesforce because Scott is an Excel wizard with his database.
I knew that was coming.
Knew that was coming. Eric may get a couple of clients out of this one, which might be one of the first.
I really like the last point that he made, the third point that he made about mapping it to the customer and all that. That's often overlooked. I would agree. I think I even do that too. Like I've built it for my own internal data needs, and then it's like, well, wait a minute, you got to make sure it speaks to the pains that you're solving for your prospects and clients. But that's a really good intro. So Eric, what do you want to add? Like, this is the part where we really turn this whole episode over to you.
Okay, so the first one I would ask is, leaving everything on the table here, I'm not a SaaS pro. I don't have millions in revenue on a W-2. I don't have the team wins, but I did grow other businesses that were B2B services, and I've captured those stories of revenue. So the challenge becomes, aside from just showing them the potential outcome in Salesforce they could have, the CRO thing is my passion. Like, that's where it goes, right? So I take full ownership of the fact that I'm going to people and saying, I'm an agency. I didn't lead some giant multi-million-dollar expansion, but here's what I am doing that works. Will you take a shot on me? Like, how do you make that pitch?
So first thing I would say is you need to adjust your mindset of, it doesn't matter whether or not you've closed millions of dollars. You've helped companies close millions of dollars. Right. So you are a fractional SaaS CRO, whether they, let them dig into it if you think that's going to be a problem. I run into this a little bit too, because people will say, well, who do you work with? And, it's mostly SaaS. And every now and then it'll be a non-SaaS customer. And I'll have to say, well, how important is that to you? What makes that so important about that industry that makes you feel like it's unique? And then I have to be willing to say, hey, if it's not, if you don't feel like I'm the guy, that's okay. Like, no big deal. The process is the process, man. It hasn't changed since Mesopotamia. I swear. Like, it really has. So.
Well, you're going to run into a lot of inherent bias about this, just so you know, if you don't already know. So there will be a large chunk of the B2B SaaS kind of world that is like, nope, sorry. You got to go back to the beginning, so to speak. And I mean, I'm not saying you have to go back to be an SDR or something, but you have to go back to be a sales manager and work your way up. So just know that that element exists. And if that's what you wanted to do, you'd have to do that, or you just have to be talking to enough people and have a large enough kind of pipeline, if you will, that you just discard those ones. And it's like, okay, no worries. You have your opinion. I have mine. One thing that could potentially be helpful, though, is to have lots of dialogue prepared around your wins. So, for example, you might be able to say, hey, one of my clients, Scott Lee's Consulting, we came in and they were at $1 million in ARR. And during the course of us working together, we got them to 10 million. And, now they're at 50 million. And this other place I worked with, the Harris Consulting Company, they started at 20 million ARR. Now they're at 100 million ARR. So be able to speak to specific opportunities, kind of when you showed up, what you did to grow it, and kind of where it is now because you positioned it, the right way. Because a lot of that journey is pretty similar, in terms of what you're doing, how you're structuring and organizing things, strategic decisions, hires. I don't know all the things you do in your business, but that is an angle that I would be trying to take if I was trying to do, what you said in your question. Go ahead, Richard.
Yeah, I would add to that too, is that if you have one, Scott's right, know your use cases and your case studies, right? So, your experience is I've worked with 20 plus SaaS organizations. Overall, that equates to this much revenue. You could then dive in deeper and say, by the way, these 3 companies came in at these 3 levels and they grew to here. Oh, by the way, they also got funding afterwards, particularly if you're working with SaaS startups, because ultimately the revenue growth is about funding if you're in the startup world. And they have to show that revenue. And so I think that's the pain you're solving. I also think you have to ask them, well, as you grow your revenue, what are you trying to accomplish? So let's say you hire me or anybody else and you get 10 million more dollars. What happens next for your organization? And they'll give you a story. We can do this, we can expand. It's like, okay, well, that's what I do. By the way, I did it here, here, and here. And I think the more you get them to tell you about what's so important about growing the revenue, not that you should ignore the SaaS part, but you're going to shift that conversation and get their mind thinking differently.
Yeah, and to that point, I think I bring something to the table for people that are going for funding, which is that I bootstrapped a tiny agency during the pandemic on customer to customer to customer revenue. I didn't borrow a single dollar, and at this moment, we have less than $2,000 of debt as a company. And I mean, we're a tiny company, but the point is still that I love and care about the financials and the health of the business itself, not just saying we got this number in this time. Like, I want it to be sustainable and healthy.
Okay. But counterpoint, a lot of startups don't care about all that fiscal responsibility whatsoever. So I worry a little bit that you could get pegged as somebody who's more of a bootstrappy kind of person if you're over optimizing in your answers for financial responsibility. I can't believe I'm uttering this sentence out loud because it seems so ridiculous, but it is true in SaaS. So just be careful about that. I think you really want to speak to the wins, the how you've done it, the who you've done it with, who you've brought in, your areas of expertise and all this kind of thing, and that that journey. That's the really important part, I think. And there's these different stages. There's like the 0 to 1 million kind of VP. There's the 0 to 10 or 20 million VP. There's the person who comes in and goes from 50 to 250 million, that kind of thing. So being able to say, I'm this type of sales leader for this type of stage. This is what I love to do. And here's why. And here's the examples of when I've done it and where I've done it. I think that story is going to play out a little stronger, frankly, than talking so much about running your own business responsibly.
Yeah, they don't care about you, Eric. They care about what you can do for them, right? Like we hear this all the time. We talk about it all the time. Just out of curiosity, how many companies have you been the fractional CRO for? Regardless
This is
of
the
whether
first one.
What's that?
This is the first one that I have that title, but
Okay.
that's what I've done in 4 other companies.
Okay, so
this would be number 5.
You have 4 different experience. You have 5 different experiences at different companies, and that's what you need to share. Not that you've got one fractional CRO. It's like, no, I've done this. And then to Scott's point, what is it they want the CRO to do? Which you know how to do. Maybe they're going to want some level of, financial stability. Maybe they're going to be like, no, we're high growth. We just need someone to come in and build the machine because, we're founder-led sales and we don't know how to do that part yet. And we just need someone to come in and do that. So that would be my other thought.
Which is my favorite. Like, that's my all-time favorite situation to be in, because I have the most experience and credibility, and I also have the most passion for it because that's my life.
Yeah, I would agree. I'm that niche, 0 to 10 million guy, right? Maybe 0 to 5, depending on how fast they want to do things or how fast I get it going. What else can we share with you? What else do you want to ask?
So what I would want to know is, when you're growing your network and you are looking at the difference between more followers or more impact, how can you keep yourself honest that way? Because I'm at a place where I don't have a massive follower count. I know that I need some significant follower count, but to be totally honest, I don't want to be focused on just doing that. I want it to be as a result of what I'm doing. And you guys seem to have done that, so I would just want to know, how can you distill that?
You want
Well, here's where I throw myself under the bus.
Yep.
Because I was not thoughtful in the way that you were about, I want to earn all these followers through my good work or good content. I was very much in the camp of, my good content doesn't matter if nobody reads it or hears it. So I cared a lot about the size of my audience, which is different than most people, I think, will tell you and talk about. So I spent a lot of time, connecting with people who I thought at the time might be somebody that I would hire one day or who might hire me one day. And the third batch of people would be people who are sort of doing my job right now that I might be able to learn from. So I was growing by connecting with sales reps, other sales leaders, and founders and CEOs. And it was a huge, huge focus. And I was actually doing that while sort of at the infancy stage of creating content. I just don't have this belief that other people do of, well, if you produce cool enough shit, eventually the audience finds you. I don't think of it like that. I think of all of the amazing bands, for example, that we've all known and loved that never made it because they never got the audience. And people probably, including them, just said, well, just keep producing good music and playing shows and the audience will come. No, it fucking won't. No, it won't. So what can I do to, get myself in the spotlight more? What can I do to increase the amount of people coming to my shows, so to speak? Right? So I cringe a little bit when I hear you say, I want my work to speak for itself and the followers to come. I don't know that I agree with you. I don't think that is the winning strategy. And I think that there's a bit of a self-sabotage in terms of growing your network if you operate that way. What do you think, Richard?
So, we started that journey at the same time in 2017, because it happened before we went to our first, even just family Costa Rica vacation. So it was a little bit different too. The communities weren't.
Yeah, years ago. This is 6-7 years ago now.
Right. Yeah. So I think Sales Hacker and Inside Sales, that Trisha's group, those were the 2 big communities, right? Um, and to that point, I did the same. I was different than Scott though, because I was already consulting. So I just wanted people who were in sales to be the eyeballs on stuff, right? And I target a particular city and I'd go, okay, Austin, VP of sales, let me send this message out, right? Let me connect with people. And we got at that stage, we were getting like 60% accept rates, and the message was really tight. It was like, hey, just trying to expand the network. Don't worry, I'm not going to turn around and try and ask you for a meeting or pitch you anything. I'm just trying to, share good content. And people appreciated it, and they did. And so, I would tackle Austin, and then I would tackle New York, and then I would tackle Seattle, and I went to these places. And I was much more interested in, well, I would say I was like Scott, the people who are going to hire me as a consultant, not as an employee. And then also knowing that, there was a groundswell of like, the more reps I know, that can help too. So that was my approach, similar to Scott, but slightly different. And I just went for it. Now, I think we can both say, there's, we wanted to get to 30K as fast as we could. We focused on salespeople, probably overlooked customer success as more than we should have, certainly marketing. And then more inbound start coming in, right? Because as you have more things and you do write content, that kind of stuff, then you get those inbounds, and then eventually you have to start pruning, right? So I've had to prune back people from different countries, which is a little insulting because that's just the way LinkedIn makes me play the game. And so there are certain countries where I've just like gone in and deleted everybody, even if they're salespeople or sales leaders, because they're not my ideal customer. They're not my profile. And I don't have, at some point, that's the part too, where you can see, well, if these people aren't engaging, I should get rid of them, because I know I'll get 200 more people coming in the next 30 days that do want to engage on my content, right? Or when people engage on my content, I would connect with them if I weren't already connected, right? Because I want to keep that. That's how I've been doing it. So, and I agree with Scott 100%. It's a numbers game. It's always been a numbers game. Like, it's almost old school, right? The more dials you make, well, the more connections you have, the more visibility you're going to get. And you just have to play the game for a while.
Proper prospecting prevents poverty.
Yeah, but I also don't like, but it don't, I've noticed several answers from you, Eric, is that you really engineer the process of everything you try to do, which is okay, right? That's going to be like, as a CRO, that's really, really good. As a salesperson, as a sales leader, but don't overdo it. Like literally, it's like Austin, VP of sales, connect, and then put the message in, right? Like, don't try to, eventually, I think, Scott, remind me, we got snooty about it. And we decided that, like, oh, this person only has 700 connections. I'm not going to connect with them.
Right? Yeah, that's part of the pruning process.
Right.
And part of, I go through that right now. Like, right. I looked at somebody's profile earlier today who sent me a request, and they had 600 followers and like no activity in the last 90 days. I'm like, I'm not going to connect with that person.
Right. So, anyway, so I think that's the answer. You can keep digging in us on that one, though, if you want to ask more around it.
Well, it's just, I have to mention this synchronicity. I feel like life is telling me to talk about this. So you brought up bands. In 2000, which is when I was making...
Band. You brought up band. Let's be perfectly clear.
Oh, Scott so Against Me was a band that Spin is writing about today on the 20th anniversary of the record that they wrote in my house. And that was my best friend's band. And they were a punk rock band that was folksy and had this diehard following of a couple thousand people in every town. But they went on the journey of exploding. And how this connects to Richard's music taste is they discovered the Gaslight Anthem and introduced them to Bruce Springsteen on their journey, who then now plays stadiums with the Gaslight Anthem. Right. And what was really crazy for me hearing Scott talking about bands and then you about Austin is I was sitting there last night thinking about the difference in my life 20 years ago when I was telling my friends in punk rock bands that I was going to try to make a living doing cold calls, and they were just kind of calling me a jerk off to my face about it. And then now I'm about to go on this podcast and I'm reading about this band last night that like has a direct connection to the boss and all of it. So there's just kind of a tightness to that circle that really made me happy to hear you guys go there with it.
I love the story so much because like when I first moved to Austin 10, 11 years ago, I remember actually listening to the Gaslight Anthem that one of my buddies introduced me to. And I remember telling Richard, like, hey, man, this is like a little punkier version of Springsteen. There's like a lot of connections between these two bands together. You should check it out. So that's a pretty cool story, man. Appreciate you sharing that.
That is good. I also like the fact that your friends are bold enough to tell you, you know, you're a jerk off to your face. Like those are good friends, by the way. Like seriously, like you do need good friends in business and life who are willing to sort of call you out on it and then still be your friend. Like that's, you know, it's a fun story, but it's important to notice that too. So this dude knows a lot about us, Scott. Like it's a little, you know, he's digging in well. So
he's done some research. What else can we help you with, Eric?
So if I were building a brand and I chose this brand, so my question would be, was I crazy to pick the outsider looking in? Does that not scale or does it scale? Because like that was the whole thing with my brand with the Ronin is like, I'm not an employee, I'm a free agent, I'm a consultant. I would work at a company that I believed in a lot, but only as like a residency. Is that wind in my sails or is that a mistake?
You can go first on that one, Scott.
I don't think it really matters. I don't know that really matters. I think what matters is that you talk about things that you have done and have some expertise in. You share openly about things that work, maybe things that don't work. You talk candidly about the journey that you're on and kind of this build in public kind of mentality, you know, and you don't get over your skis suddenly talking about, I don't know, marketing attribution if you don't know anything about marketing attribution and that kind of stuff. And I think people start to get a sense of like, is Eric being authentic or not? And I think if you can make your brand authentically you and it stands out a little bit somehow from the sea of everybody else, then I think you're in pretty good shape, you know? And your brand kind of just claims you rather than you. Doug Landis has said that your brand claims you more than you claim your brand. So I didn't set out in building my brand by saying, hey, I'm going to be the, you know, guy with a beard and the tequila guy and the surfing guy, like in sales. Like I was just being myself. And some of these things have now taken over the brand that I thought that I was kind of building, right? And so there's a little bit of that's a differentiator, is what I'm trying to say. Like if you just think who else, you know, out there who's a sales leader is a surfer and a tequila drinker and has a beard and talks like straight talk and does these there's probably dozens and dozens that are out there who do the same things as me, if not better. But maybe not as many people know about them because, to the earlier point, they didn't put the energy on building the audience necessarily, right? So I don't think that you being an outsider looking in type brand is a bad thing. If you did the opposite of that, I don't know that that's a bad thing either. You just have to find a way to be authentically you and separate yourself somehow from the pack. Something unique comes out that everybody else looks at and listens to and is like, this person is telling the truth. This is not a bunch of garbage. I'm not being fed a bunch of lines. This is like this person's real journey. Richard?
Yeah, I'm going to ask you a question. Eric, how big of a risk taker are you?
Very big.
Very big. Okay. So Scott and I love to play this game. Would you get into a shark cage and go see the sharks?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Got it. All right.
He's already a bigger risk taker than me after answering that one right there.
Exactly. The reason I'm asking is because you've said so many things that are so process oriented. So I'm trying to figure out who you are, right? Like more than what I know from online. And everything Scott's talking about, whether you're, inside looking out or outside looking in, is about taking a risk, right? This podcast was like a risk, right? And not and before the podcast was the event, right? Like Scott just, went to Costa Rica. Scott came home, posted something on LinkedIn to say, hey, would people do this? People said yes, and called me and called Jeff and was like, let's try this thing. Let's see what happens out of it. That's how the event started. And then came the podcast. And I was like feeling nervous about, I don't want to do a podcast by myself. I'm really scared. I called Scott. We were talking and he was like, okay, yeah, let's do it. And so we called it the Servant Sales Podcast. And so it's okay for you to take some risks, because particularly on the social and the branding side, if you miss, nobody knows. Nobody saw it, right? So I think that's the kind of thing, right? Like, and again, to Scott's point, you can share good stories, you can share bad stories, right? Like my brand, we asked once at an event that we did in Austin, they were talking about Scott and I, and they, we said, well, what is our brand, right? And the answer came back that Scott is fuck you and Richard is let's be friends. So which, again, we didn't choose that. We didn't do things that way. That just is how people perceived us. And of course we owned it. We don't care. We think that's kind of funny. We like that kind of stuff. I think Scott's seen as again, at the same thing people were talking about. This is a couple of years ago, Scott and his approach and how he's very direct and honest and sincere about things. And, Richard's the same, but Richard's also the mental health guy, right? Like, because of the things you talk about are the ways people are going to perceive you. So like this year, I've been focusing that my goal for most of my content is around leadership, right? Better leadership. So I'm building out some content for that, but I don't know that I'm necessarily known for that, right? I'm more known as a sales trainer and more as, helping SDRs and AEs, and I do a little bit of the stuff on the leadership side. And so now I'm trying to build that out. And by the end of the year, hopefully that shifts a little bit,
Well, this makes me have to ask you, do you remember your advice when we talked, like, I don't know, 3-4 months ago? What you told me about my brand, and you said something about there's a hole in your story?
I do not.
Okay, I talked to Richard about this, and I basically cold video messaged him and said,
Good.
I don't know what I'm doing.
I feel better about not remembering. He's talking about you, Richard.
Right.
Yeah, so what wound up happening was you said something to the effect of, there's a big part of your story I can tell you're not telling. And for me, what it was that I spent almost a decade as a bouncer while I was learning how to run businesses. I made so little money at the beginning that I needed that cash. And you basically said, well, would you say that on a podcast? And I was like, yeah. And he's like, well, that is it. That's the thing right there. Like, talk about how you used to be a bouncer. And if I hadn't had that conversation with Richard, I would have continued believing that that was a structural liability to my success in this space. And to be perfectly honest, when I embraced that part of it, when I embraced the I'm not for everybody, I got the most traction I've ever gotten in my career, just from that one tidbit of like, don't hide that part of your story. Don't hide the dark part of your story.
Yeah, I agree. And then there's the other part too that I can't remember if I told you, but I was looking today at you, was that you were like the junk king, right?
Yep.
You had Scott, he had one of those junk businesses, like was it 1-800-JUNK, called Junk or something?
Both. So I worked at the two biggest ones, and I moved them from B2C to B2B in my focus. And that's where I first started studying things like ABM and studying marketing, was because there's serious money to be made in junk removal. Most people don't get that. And I used to be the guy loading fridges into a truck, but I also learned how to make that such a wildly profitable endeavor.
And that's what, by the way, that's what a fractional CRO does, or any head of sales. They remove the junk from the pipeline. Like, that's part of your job, right?
Nice.
And a cool part is you get to mold people to make sure they're not junk, but then if it's not the right fit, then you have to remove them too, like not in an inhumane way. But that again, another fun story, right? That people will be like, oh, I know exactly what that blue and green truck is that sits at the corner of this two busy intersections. Oh, you're that guy. And now you've got this whole other experience. Like, I think all these different pieces of you are 100% what make you great, right? Like, I don't know, go trademark sales junk and then put a circle with a slash through it, like no sales junk. Like, that's you, right? Like something like that could be you.
And then that becomes part of the story potentially, right? An outsider busts down the doors, makes their way in, making it happen, and that inspires other people.
Yep. And by the way, every time
potentially
someone
trying to follow a similar path.
Yeah, everybody who hires a CRO or VP of sales or director of sales, they're looking for an outsider. They don't want another insider. The problem they have is they're too much of an insider themselves, right? They need someone to shake it up. Now, that doesn't mean they like it when you start to do it. It's a whole other discussion, but that's how I see it. So.
Well, we're moving towards the end rapidly. Wow. I don't know. Yeah, we're moving towards the end here rapidly, but we want to thank Sendoso as well as Scratchpad and our good friends at Outreach one more time. Hit them with the link, Richard.
click.outreach.io/surf. click.outreach.io/surf.
And go to surfandsales.com. We've got a couple spots open in May and one spot only open the first week in November and a bunch of spots open the second week of November. We'll have a good time. You won't regret it. Eric, one more question before we get out of here. What can we do? What can we help you with?
How can I help people coming into the game the most from where I am in the food chain? Besides just connecting them to people above myself in the stream, what's the biggest impact I can have for people that talk to me about how do I get into this?
Well, my answer was going to be, except for, then Eric said, except for this. That was going to be my answer. I mean, I think just talking about the things that you've experienced and gone through and what's worked and what's not worked, kind of what to expect. I think level setting people's expectations would be pretty helpful. If you remember the very beginning of the show, you asked the question and I started off by saying, well, a good bunch of people are going to tell you, no, you can't do that. You're going to have to go to the beginning, right? That was an example of me sort of trying to set some expectations from you. So, I think there's a lot of value in that. If you can do that for other people who are kind of coming in, and I think just trying to be a lighthouse, if you will, a beacon of a hope that, oh, this guy made it. So, maybe I can too.
Yeah, I think that's all correct. And I would add to it that, talk about the mistakes. You can put yourself out there, with the mistakes you've made or the lessons you've learned, however you want to frame it. I think back in the day, before the communities took off, I should probably go do this. I haven't done it in a while. That free advice day, you might need to go get more connections first, but I post my cell phone number in LinkedIn and people will call me and they'll just say, hey, I saw you post and saying you're giving away free advice. Here I am, and they'll do that. I might even say you're always trying to pay it forward, but you might want to spend a little bit more time connecting with more people than worrying about that. The people who want to help or who ask for help will be good, right? Will come to you. And I think too, I know, because you're on 6 different communities, right? Chiming in where appropriate is good because that helps you scale the advice, right? Like I'm very, very, very much into modern sales pros, right? So I know how to write stuff for that group and people know me for that. And I've gotten some gigs from it and those kinds of things. So it's just give out the advice. And I think for now, just while you're building your LinkedIn profile, and maybe you can still do it too, but comment in the communities you're in, participate, show up, I think matters. And how you show up matters too.
10-4.
All right. Thanks so much, Eric, for joining us on the Surface Sales Podcast. And we reenacted a crow's nest session.
Yep.
Live from the beach
at Surf and Sales.
Oh, we should have put up the fake beach backgrounds from Zoom, Scott. That would have been.
Or actually, what we should have done is had an actual picture of the crow's nest itself. See, if
Yeah.
we knew what we were doing, Eric, this is
Right.
what we would have
See,
done.
we need to hire. We should hire
Eric
somebody with our
to
social
set
branding.
the background for us.
You need to hire Project Kickass, and I'll get the waves in behind you. Takes
Yeah.
a half an hour.
So
There we go. All right, Eric, we appreciate you, man. Thanks so much. Where
Thanks,
can
bud.
everybody find you?
Sure.
All right, Eric,
Hey, thanks.
before we get out of here, tell everybody where they can find you.
Okay, so you can find 21 knots. That's 21, the numbers, knots like nautical miles per hour. We put the wind in your sails if you need your Salesforce instance to represent your GTM motions. If you want to look better on a Zoom call, or you want to build a community or have a transformative virtual event, holler at Project Kickass, PKA Solves, or Project Kickass, you'll find it. And if you want to move your sales motions into Slack, you can find me at Slack First Sales.
Eric, can they just find you on LinkedIn?
And I'm Eric Steeves on LinkedIn, aka the Bears Force.
Right, and that's STEEVES. Yes, Eric Steeves. So, all right, bud. Hey, good to catch up with you. Thank you so much.
Really appreciate you both. Thank you so much.